Hello and welcome to Must Read Fiction, a place for people who know that life is better with a novel in hand. I'm Erin Popelka, and I am so delighted to be here today with author Angela Douglas. Welcome.
Hi.
Yay, thank you so much for being here. A little bit about Angela Douglas. She is a Canadian author who lives in the Okanagan region of British Columbia with her husband and kids. She writes thrillers and creative nonfiction. When she isn't working or hanging out with her family, she hides in her studio with her bulldog Frankie, writing her next book. And we are talking about her debut novel, Every Fall, which I know you have right next to you. Oh, look at that fantastic book, Every Fall. So, Angela Douglas, please tell me about Every Fall.
Yes. Hi. Thanks, Erin. Thanks for having me here today. Every Fall is my debut novel, and it is a psychological thriller, but a blended genre thriller. There's some spooky elements in it. The book is about a couple that gets married and starts a family quickly, and they're living in a pretty crime-riddled city where Jake, the husband, works as a police officer. Life is as good as it can be in the city until crime follows him home from work. The two of them decide that they need to leave and move to a different city in this big, beautiful house. And everything is great there until Bree starts to hear strange sounds and voices in the house. At the same time, Jake experiences a loss at work and things begin to spiral from there. They wonder if they're going insane or if there really is something going on in their house.
Oh my goodness. So many questions, so many layers. Like, sounds like some history with these characters and things changing and them learning and working together. So, oof, so much to that. Ooh, get my hands on that book. Yeah. And so you mentioned that Jake, that the character is in law enforcement. And so I know that
Yes.
that's a really big theme in the book is that culture of law enforcement in Canada. Why was it important to you to explore that in Every Fall?
There are many reasons. I thought it was very interesting as not a lot of the books I've read kind of go deep into the family side of it. And also, I'm married to a retired police officer, so I have firsthand experience in that life. A
Wow.
different
So
life than Jake and Bree, but in a way, all
yes,
the same.
definitely. But a lot of that lived experience. So when
Yes.
you say like places, when you've had other things that you've read, it really doesn't go into that detail. You're speaking from lived experience. You have not seen yourself represented on the page.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah. Wow. And so as you go to depict some of that culture of law enforcement, what really came through?
A lot of different things because there's lived experience on my part and other spouses and families that I know. And also, there's a lot of stories that come along with it in the crime world that I find very interesting and also difficult. Sometimes people don't want to hear the other side of what they're dealing with because there are definitely some, bad apples that get bad media attention and that sort of a thing. But I can promise you there's a lot of good apples in there too. And so I kind of wanted to explore what a family goes through and also tell their story.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for slowing us down there and for telling that story. And you kind of went into this to sort in describing the summary of Every Fall, but mental health is another theme that's
Yes.
part of the novel. And the effects of trauma. And so how did that, mental health and the effects of trauma affect the characters? And what are you hoping that readers will walk away with that, as they explore that?
That's a great question and a big one because they are both facing their own trauma. So I thought the topic of trauma and law enforcement and the types of things that they see on a daily basis, most people will never see one or two of those incidences in their entire life. And the impact of being in that world day in and day out definitely takes a toll on the police officer themselves, but also the family. In this story, Bree, the wife, was also struggling with having two kids really close back to back and then experiencing postpartum depression. With both of those conditions come along all kinds of symptoms that can be very terrifying, and you can lose trust in yourself. And so the two of them going through that at the same time, they weren't really trusting each other either.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And I know I have a bit of a mental health background too, and so like that symptoms of trauma can include like irritability and trouble concentrating, which when you kind of throw some newborns in and symptoms of
Yes.
postpartum depression, then you're also getting some of those pieces. And so I imagine that just made kind of like a swirl of really challenging
And then
circumstances.
lack of sleep. I mean, I know if I don't get a good night's sleep, I'm a mess, and these people aren't sleeping at all. Or
Yeah,
hardly at all.
absolutely. Yeah. And to your point too of law enforcement, like, they see stuff that's just part of their everyday that would be the most traumatic moment of many people's lives. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've seen that personally. I'm married to a nurse. And so, in that hospital setting, people are coming in. And for many people, when they go to the hospital, that is one of the worst things that will ever happen to him
Yeah.
or for them. And for him, it was just like, yep, it's a Tuesday, I'm going to
Yeah.
work and getting a glimpse of this routine for him, but that was just this very extreme moment for his patients. And that's probably
Absolutely.
similar. How similar is
Mhm.
that to law enforcement?
Very similar. I think any first responder, hospital worker, EMT, fireman, they all see things that are just very hard to process, even at the best of times. And yeah, they do see other people on the worst days of their lives, and it's a Tuesday, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
Too wild.
And yeah, super wild, super wild. And as readers, I feel like we get this really privileged position where when we read a book, we get this like glimpse into the world. And so it both widens our perspective, but it does so in a really safe way.
Yeah.
So how are you hoping that like reading every fall will affect readers?
I have a lot of hopes and a little bit of insight because I've had a lot of early reviews. Lots of good ones, some not so great, like with everything. But it does seem like some people are getting insight into a world that maybe they don't have experience in. And so, a little bit more empathy maybe for first responders would be amazing. And again, not all, there's always bad apples in every single career. But also for Bree and postpartum, I also see that's being talked about a lot more. But when I first conceived the idea of the book, it wasn't really talked about very much, and it's huge, and it affects a lot of people in very profound ways.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that actually like kind of all leads into my next question, which is that there is a supernatural element to this book.
Yes.
And I think in your description you said also like some spooky parts, so maybe a little bit of horror coming through. So tell me, and that's actually not common in like a psychological thriller for that to all kind of be combined in there. So tell me about your decision as the author to include those supernatural elements.
Absolutely. I knew I was going to do that from the very start. I have experience with postpartum myself, and I'm very familiar with other types of trauma. And the idea that any kind of paranormal or ghost elements could be less frightening than living with one of those conditions drove me to write the book. And so I know that including paranormal in a thriller isn't everybody's cup of tea, and it's definitely sold as a blended genre book. So people who don't like a little horror and a little paranormal might not be for them. But I promise that the idea behind doing that was more emphasis on the rest of the book and more kind of like, could real ghosts be less scary than living with either of these conditions, or at least in Jake and Bree's circumstances?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, and I can kind of see that really interesting play between like, ooh, if this is a ghost, maybe I'm okay. But if that
Yeah.
isn't a ghost, like, am I okay? What are we doing
Yeah.
with this? How does that go? And then that kind of shakes all sorts of core questions about who
Yeah.
am I? What help do I need? Am I on my own? Like, how do we get out of this?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, so much rich material to explore in every fall. Thank you. Thank you for going on that journey with Jake and Bree and their family and giving that to us to sort of like take a glimpse of and get to go on this like really incredible ride together. So thank you for that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. And then my last question. This is your debut novel. Every
It is.
fall is your debut novel. So how are you celebrating the release of this book, baby?
I've got all kinds of plans. It's very funny that the launch of it actually lands the week before my birthday. So I'm going and doing a few signings in different cities that I used to live. I've moved around a lot. Also, problem being married to a police officer. You do move a lot. And so I'm going to a lot of the places that I used to live and doing a signing and seeing old friends and going for coffees and dinners and just a full week of celebrating the book and reconnecting and I'm very excited to do that in 10 days, 9 days. 9 days
9
now.
days, yes, because we're recording is 9 days before the book comes out.
Yeah.
Well, that's so exciting, both like to celebrate your birthday, happy early birthday, the
Thank you.
birthday of every fall. And I often think like with a first novel, it seems like the first novel is sort of like a culmination of like your entire life thus far. I mean, I feel like you could thank your like first grade teacher for teaching you
Yes.
how to like read and write because if you didn't have that, you wouldn't have this first novel. And so I
Yeah.
love that this book being released is also kind of letting you tour a lot of those places where you lived and you have like community and connection. What a wonderful tour.
Yeah. I'm excited.
Yes. Yes. Well, thank you so very much for including must-read fiction as part of that launching of the book into the world. And thank you, Angela Douglas. Thank you so very much for taking the time to speak with me today and for writing every fall. And must readers, please go check it out. Thank you so very
Awesome.
much.
Thank you, Erin.